Hello, Gareth here. So in today's lesson, we're going to paint this beautiful snow scene. So let's begin with materials. So here is my palette and it goes from warm to cool, roughly. And the paints I'm using will be yellow ochre, imidazolone yellow, pyrrole red, alizarin crimson, phthalo blue, cerulean blue, and titanium white. Wow, I wish they would make the names easier. Brushes, we're using a big flat brush, a smaller flat brush, a pointed oval, and a liner brush. Okay, so let's begin. So I'm doing the video at double speed. So what you can do is at each stage you can stop the video and then copy what I've done and then continue from there. So I'm drawing the brook. So that was the hardest thing to do in this painting, the sides of the brook. Very, very challenging for me. So you can look at the photo at the beginning and copy that. And then I've got my figure. That was fairly easy to draw. Okay, painting time. So I'm wetting the sky with the big flat brush. So you want it not soaking wet, but also not kind of dryish or just slightly moist. You want it somewhere in between. Okay, now I'm using the smaller flat brush and the imidazolone yellow, difficult for me to say, and I'm going round where the sun is. So I'm going to leave the sun as white paper. Then I'm using yellow ochre and I'm going around the yellow, and it's important to leave that yellow. Don't paint over it. Very important. And then I'm adding some pyrrole red. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. But I'm adding some pyrrole red to the yellow ochre, and then I'm going around the yellow ochre on the paper. And on the left hand side I'm leaving some white paper because that will be blue sky. So I wash my brush, I get some cerulean blue, and I fill in that white area. So I'm careful not to touch the orange paint at first because it might change the colour a little. But once I've painted most of it, then I will start to do the edge. And then I've made it a little bit darker and I go back into that and do the corner. Okay, now I'm going to do the clouds. So for the clouds, so my mix, I got it wrong first time, so I'm doing it again. Alizarin crimson and cerulean blue. So if your mix is wrong, you can just wipe it out with some tissue and begin again if it goes really wrong. So I establish roughly where the clouds are going to be, and then I start to blend that colour into the paint underneath. And so it starts to become a softer, lighter colour. It's really fun doing this. But I think I made this sky too complicated. And with my students, what I will do is simplify the sky, otherwise we'll be painting for about 3 hours, which is too long. But it's looking good. But the important thing is to leave some colours. Don't paint the whole thing. So you can still see the white, the yellow ochre, the orange, the blue. You can still see those colours, and that's what makes it a really beautiful and interesting sky. Yeah, I probably overdid it, to be honest. Okay, so that's dried. Now with my big flat brush, I'm wetting the bottom part of the sky where I'm going to do some distant hills, and then I'm going to do the snow in the foreground. So I've mixed up some cerulean blue and alizarin crimson, and there's probably some yellow ochre in that mix as well, which makes it a little bit more of a grey colour rather than a purple colour. And I'm just going to paint the whole snow area. So with big areas, you need a big brush. So now with my pointed oval brush, I'm mixing cerulean blue, alizarin crimson, okay, and I'm doing the distant hills now. Distant hills, possibly trees. And the reason why I wet the paper there to begin with was because I want a soft edge. So this is wet in wet. To be honest, I don't think I did that strong enough, as you will see later on. Now I'm doing a really fun technique, which is putting tissue over the snow, and then I'm using the end of a brush, but it could be any pointed object, and I'm just like going across the tissue paper. I'm even dabbing the paint with the tissue paper, and it creates an interesting texture. I've only just started using this technique, so I need more practice. Anyway, this mix is phthalo blue, alizarin crimson and yellow ochre. That's the mix I normally use when I want to get my darkest darks. That trio. Now, this was definitely the most challenging part of this painting, doing the bank of this brook, getting those sides right. And now and again I spray the paper to keep it wet, because it can dry out fairly quickly, and I don't want that to happen because I want a soft edge, not a hard edge. I spent a really long time doing this. And you'll see later that this was all wrong, and I did it again. So something you will learn in this painting is that you can rework your watercolor paintings to some extent. So remember, this is at double speed. So spraying again. And you can see that the painting's slowly starting to come together. So now I've got my liner brush, and I'm just using pure water here, and I'm doing grass. But I didn't quite get the textural effect that I was looking for, sadly. I wanted it to be a bit more dramatic than that. Then I'm darkening the sides a little bit. But it's looking pretty good. And now I'm also using liner brush and some of that dark mix around the grass areas. And then working on the frozen brook. And sometimes I use my finger to soften some of the sides of the bank. So it's almost like modelling, and it's a real fun thing to do. So have a go at trying to model, to play with the paint in this way, because it's a lot of fun. And if you're lucky, you can end up with a good painting. Okay, so I'm making the same mix, phthalo blue, alizarin crimson and yellow ochre. And I'm just going into that grass area again and darkening it a bit more. It's looking pretty nice. Okay, it's now dried, and as you can see, it's faded a lot. So now I've got phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, and in a minute, probably, some yellow ochre. So I'm using my pointed oval brush, and I'm now going to do the bushes. Now, an important point is, when I was mixing the paint in the palette, at the end, I pushed the hairs down and twisted the brush, and that helped all the hairs to split, and that helps give you that beautiful rough edge that you need when you when you paint these bushes. So it is a technique, and at first you're probably not going to achieve that edge, so you have to practice. Possibly you can have a go on some scrap paper, and that can help. And then if it works on the scrap paper, have a go on your real paper. But it just takes practice, and with time you'll get good at this technique. It took me a while anyway, and a bit of frustration. But look at that edge. That's a really beautiful edge, and it looks very, very effective. So I'm really happy with this tree. This was a real challenge. So I began at the top and moved down. And it's a pretty good dry brush effect. But you can see like the distant hills in the background. It's hard to see if they really are distant hills or just the sky. So I should have done that a bit stronger, that blue behind the trees, just above the horizon line. Needed to be quite a bit stronger. And now I'm doing the bottom part of the bushes and blending it into the landscape, into the ground area. Okay, so now I've finished that, I've got my big flat brush, phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, and a touch of yellow ochre, just to grey it off. And now I'm going to paint over the snow area again, because I thought it was too light. Now the important point is, don't go over the same area too many times, because you will shift the paint underneath. So if you notice, I only go over the same area once or twice, and then I move on down. And at the bottom I'm using a really dark mix, then bringing it up and blending it into the mix above. And I think you'll agree, it looks a lot better now. So don't be afraid to do dramatic changes like that. So I also sprayed it to keep it wet. Now I've got my pointed oval brush, and I took out a bit of a highlight there, using the tissue again and my brush to create some texture. I was only partially successful, I think, with this technique, and in the future I hope to experiment more with this technique and do a more successful experiment with it, or achieve a more successful effect with it. Okay, so now that's phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre, and it's a real strong thick mix, and I'm going to do the bank of the brook again. And then you've got these little hillocks, I'm not sure if you'd call that a hillock, and undulations. It's really good fun, but it's also very challenging doing this. And you can see it start to come together now. I think this is going to be a subject that I come back to maybe a few times, because it's just a very exciting subject. And I think I still haven't done the best version of it yet. So I'm using tissue now to remove some of these darks, because I'm not happy with that, the shape of the bank at the front there. So that's a kind of modelling technique. And then I'm going in here with some darks. I think I overdid this, to be honest. I think if I'd left it a bit more, left some more of that area, it would have been better. But I went over most of it. There you go. And I'm spraying it again. And I think I'm doing splatter now. That crazy hand movement, I think, is splatter. Possibly I'm splattering water, and I'm trying to create texture. As you can see with the water area where it's frozen ice, right? Frozen ice, right? I overdid that. So now I'm doing some of those undulations. But it's a really nice composition, because that curving brook leads us right into the picture. And of course, at the end of that brook, we've got the figure, which is the focal point of the painting. Okay, now I'm using a liner brush, and I tried to do the grass hairs with the liner brush and water, just water. And I did a bit of splatter as well. But I didn't quite get the textural effect I wanted. Probably the paint was not wet enough, so I didn't quite get such a dramatic effect. Then using my finger to like blend in the paint where it's maybe a bit, the edges are a bit hard or it's a bit too strong, just to soften it. And then I'm trying to do those grass hairs. They're not too bad. Did I say grass hairs? Grass, blades of grass, sorry. And now what I'm trying to do is remove paint because I did too much and create some light areas. I think I'm using the small flat brush there. Okay, liner brush and doing more splatter, splattering water. And on the left hand side too. Using my finger. Wow, I'm doing everything, spraying and splattering. But it's a lot of fun. And you can see I'm starting to build up some texture now, but it took a lot of effort, right? If you do it right, it shouldn't really take that much effort, I think. So I really had to work at this because I'd gone wrong somehow with my timing or my mixes. And here I am using my finger and doing some softer areas. And then liner brush using that dark mix. And now I'm going to do the figure. So I really enjoy painting figures. And this figure worked out pretty well too. So you really want your liner brush to be very, very pointed. As pointed as possible. So for that reason you need a slightly thick mix rather than a watery mix. A watery mix will produce something a bit splodgy. You won't be able to get those thin lines. And now I'm going to do the fence. So do your best to try and get those posts really straight, not wonky. And I'm starting to do the posts closer together, smaller and thinner, so creating that illusion of perspective, of them getting further and further away. And now I'm doing the horizontal beams or bars, and once again you really need a pointed brush, so take the time to make it as pointed as possible and don't rush it. If it does go wrong, you can quickly wipe it out with a tissue, but you have to be quick and then have another go. So that's looking pretty good. So now I'm doing some rocks in the ice, and I'm doing just a few. And I'm giving the rocks reflections now. And the tone looks a bit strong, so I'm using my finger to soften soften them so that they blend more into the picture. And also that will give them a bit of a softer edge as well, because you're kind of smudging the edge. So phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, and a touch of yellow ochre. That's my most common mix. And I'm doing some bushes a bit lower down because I thought it needed it. Yeah, and I think that looks better. Okay, so now I'm mixing titanium white, any white is okay, with some yellow ochre. There might be a touch of pyrrole red in there. And I'm doing highlights. So once again, you really want that liner brush to be very, very pointed. And so I'm just doing some highlights on the figure, on the posts, and on these rocks. And you want it to be a really razor sharp, thin line. And yeah, it looks pretty nice. Yeah, and sometimes you have to do the highlight a second time just to make it strong enough. Okay, and I'm using that dark mix again. Phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, and yellow ochre. There might be some cerulean blue. And then I'm doing a few birds. The birds are just 3 strokes, 1, 2, 3, that's it. And once again, you really want that liner brush for the hairs to be really thin. And there we go. So now I'm just going to do my signature GN Gareth nailer. So I really hope you enjoyed this lesson. Please have a go and have some fun. And please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And also in the description box, you can see a link that will show you some of my paintings that are, well, prints that are available to buy. So if you see anything you like, please go ahead and buy one of them. So I'll be back again. Yes, I'll be back again in about 2 or 3 weeks with another watercolor lesson. That's all. Bye for now and happy painting.